Hello and welcome to CrossTalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. Climate change or preying upon fears. There's been a lot of talk about both in Copenhagen. Everyone appears to agree that some united approach is needed to address what is called global warming. But that same sense of agreement seems unlikely to be translated into a new climate treaty the entire world can embrace. To discuss this, I'm joined by Professor Bjorn Lomborg. He's in Copenhagen. He's the director of the Copenhagen Consensus Center and author of the book, The Skeptical Environmentalist. In London, we have Piers Corbyn, the owner of Weather Action, which devises weather forecasts up to a year in advance. And in Washington, we have Michael McCracken, the chief scientist for climate change programs at the Climate Institute, and another member of our CrossTalk team, Yelena Hanga. Michael, I'd like to go to you first in Washington. So what is it? Is the world coming to an end because of global change, or it's all a fraud to make money? Because I'm sorry, that's how the debate has gotten down to in the media. Which one is it?
Well, it's actually neither of those. Because of our activities, we're changing the climate. It's becoming different than what it has been. Human activities are changing atmospheric composition. That, in turn, is tending to warm the climate. As the climate warms, there are all sorts of impacts. You start melting ice. You start affecting ecosystems and plants and animal species. And what we've come to recognize is that if we're going to stop climate change, which the nations of the world agreed to in 1992 in a major UN agreement, we have to make substantial cuts in greenhouse gas emissions relatively quickly.
Okay, you make it sound very simple. Piers, if I can go to you in London, do you agree with that? I mean,
Yep.
That was a scientist that just said the Earth is warming up because of what people are doing, and we have to do something about it. Go ahead, Piers.
Well, it's nonsense. He's a scientist and he's on the gravy train. The world is now cooling and has been cooling for 7 years, even using the fraudulent figures of the Climate Research Unit of the University of East Anglia. The satellite figures show it's cooling faster than they do, but it is still cooling, even though CO2 is going up. Historically, there's no relationship between carbon dioxide and world temperatures or carbon dioxide and storm levels. What we've got going on in Copenhagen is a junket to trick the world. They have a nonsense policy. It's a failed science based on fraudulent data. And what we have there is really a thieves' kitchen where they are organising around the world how to make billions out of carbon trading. The carbon trading scheme is now worth 126 billion a year. Every pound traded is a profit for somebody, and this is resulting in loss of jobs in Britain. For example, the Cora Steelworks, which has been closed down to make money for carbon traders.
Okay, if I go to you, if I go to you, Bjorn, where do you stand in the middle of this? It's a real science, or it's fraudulent science. Where do you fit in? I have an idea. Remember you on the program before. Thanks for coming back. Go ahead.
Well, it's good to be here, Peter. Listen, I'm a social scientist. I think we have to listen to what's the best science evidence that we're getting. And clearly, most of the world's scientists are telling us that increasing CO2 in the atmosphere, all other things equal, means that we're going to see rising temperatures. Even very skeptical people like Dick Linson and Pat Michaels are telling us that's the very basic connotation. So I would definitely go with Michael in saying this is a problem. It's by no means the end of the world. And I would also agree with Piers that yes, there's a lot of other areas where people have great interest in promoting this, in making it more seem like the end of the world. It's not. It is a problem, and it definitely is a problem we need to tackle. But let's tackle it.
Bjorn, can I stay with you here? But I mean, I am not a scientist, okay, and most people aren't. And we have to listen to scientists. We have two scientists that radically disagree. Can you see how that creates a problem for the rest of us?
And it does. And I really believe that's why we've tried to put together the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, or the UN's Climate Panel Council. This is not a perfect body, and yes, there are problems with it. We've just seen some of them revealed with the email scandal, the climate gate, if you will. But what it does tell us is that the vast majority of scientists are telling us more CO2 in the atmosphere will create more heat, and that will eventually be a problem for everyone. So it is a problem. It's not the end of the world, but it can't be said it's nothing at all.
Michael, if I could go back to you in Washington, Bjorn mentioned this email thing, this climate gate. What is that, subterfuge? Is this really an intention to derail the talks or turn attention away from what's going on in Copenhagen?
Well, I think the media coverage has done some of that. I think if you look at it closely, there's some questions about exactly what the data, how they were treated, but that's always done. All data have to be looked at very carefully and examined, and you try and decide if it's a homogeneous set, if it was taken carefully enough. I mean, there's going to be another discussion coming out pretty soon about what happened during World War II. All the measurements during World War II over the ocean look like they're a little bit off, and they're finding that some ships measured a little bit differently than other ships. So you have to clean up the data, you have to analyze it. This is mostly a controversy about some of that, and some frustration felt because there are some attacks on the scientific community by some who sort of attribute other motives to us. And I think that's very unfortunate. We heard some of that from Piers. I think saying we're on the gravy train is just nonsense.
Let's go back to you, Piers. I mean, is it politicized? Is this a gravy train for some people? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not science. It's a political operation, and it's a thieves' kitchen to rob the world and hold back third world development. The idea that it's an opinion poll is, of course, absurd. Science rests on evidence. Now, the scientists of the IPCC have refused to present any evidence that carbon dioxide actually controls world temperatures or increased storms. And the reason why they refuse is because there is no such evidence. And IPCC reviewers who've pointed that out have been excluded from the process. I repeat, it's a political operation designed by governments to make money.
Piers,
go ahead,
wrong.
Michael.
Okay, you come forward, you show me some evidence which demonstrates that CO2 controls temperatures. There is no such evidence. What you're saying is false science based on fraudulent data. And I repeat, that data in the Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia is fraudulent.
Okay, Michael, you want to retort, and then I'd like to go to Bjorn.
Wait just a second.
Go ahead.
Wait just a second. First, you said people are excluded. The IPCC has a very open process. I've been part of the setup for it for the U.S. government. We've insisted that they insist they cover.
All right, Bjorn, if I could go to you.
I'll get to offer reviews in different places.
All right. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
They've refused to turn up to Imperial College to give evidence, to actually explain how they can argue that CO2 controls temperatures. We've asked them to come along. Scientists to scientists, they have refused. The reason they refuse is they have no evidence. If you have evidence, send it to me, please. Piers@weatheraction.com. Piers@weatheraction.com. Email me evidence which shows that CO2 drives temperatures. Come on, email it to me, please. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Michael, do you want to respond? And I'd like to go to Bjorn. Go ahead.
Well, I think we have a number of ways of understanding that. Some of it's, theoretical. Some of it's looking at the planets. Some of it's looking at Earth history. Now, it isn't quite, because the Earth system is a very complicated system and you can't reconstruct it in a laboratory, maybe not be quite the kind of evidence that he wants, but there's basically no other explanation for how the atmosphere works and how the atmosphere of the planets worked and how it has worked than if these gases in the atmosphere are capturing the heat radiation and tending to warm the planet. And I think that's something that's been well established for a century or more.
Bjorn, there is plenty of explanations. You've been given a Mickey Mouse view of the world and you're just repeating it. The fact is that other planets are actually warming at present because of solar activity. Now, I don't think you driving down the streets anywhere in Europe is causing Jupiter to warm up.
All right, I have to go to Bjorn here.
I'd
like to go to Bjorn. Hey, you guys, we got to be polite to Bjorn. He's been very patient here.